Hello, I am Kim Sorges with Not Consumed Ministries, where we help families grow in faith so they can live not consumed by life. Welcome. I'm so glad you joined me today to talk about obedience, specifically consequences for kids. So I have a huge list of consequences, so the best consequences that I've used, that my friends have used. But before we get there, I want to make sure we're on the same page about using consequences and when it's appropriate. Kids can be a little frustrating, right? Can I get an amen? And sometimes we kind of lose our cool and we just start laying in the consequences. And we want to make sure that it is an appropriate time to have a consequence. So let's start there. Before you give a consequence, there are 3 things I want you to do. First, make sure you've taught your kids about obedience. We do that through the study because I said so. If you haven't seen it yet, you can pick it up at the Not Consumed store. Obedience is something we do every day. We obey God, we have to obey the law, or we go to jail, we get tickets, whatever. And it never goes away just because we turn 18 and move out of our parents' house. So we want our kids to understand obedience is important. It's part of who we are. It's part of how we show God that we believe and that we love him. The second thing is you want to make sure that you've laid down some simple ground rules. Rules can get really out of control very quickly, and you can't encompass all of the things in your list. God said, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and love others like yourself, right? That was his law. That was the 2 rules that he said you can sum it up into. So that's exactly what we do in our house. I say we love up first. And by the way, it's out of that love and only out of that love that we can love out. Okay, so if you've taught obedience and you've kept your rules simple, the last thing you need to do is ask yourself some questions. Is it a sin against God, or is it more of an inconvenience for me? Like, are they just being loud right now and I feel annoyed? Just because the kids are being loud right now doesn't necessarily mean they are sinning or they're disobeying or doing something that they shouldn't be doing, especially if we haven't even given them the chance to calm down a little or whatever. So that's the first question. Is this a sin against God, or is this more of an inconvenience to me or something I just don't like? Okay, number 2. Is this foolishness or childishness? I learned this when I was a very new parent. It has come in so handy for me, especially when your kids are really little. Childishness would be something that your child does because of their age. Maybe they're not quite ready for something. Maybe they're still learning a lot of things. When my oldest was really little, she was very verbal and she was very rude and disrespectful, but it was childishness. It wasn't her thinking she was being rude. She was just expressing things she thought were okay to say. And we had to teach her, if it's foolishness, that means the child is rebelling, doing the wrong thing. They know better, but they're doing it anyway. Ask yourself, is it foolishness or is it childishness? If it's foolishness, there may need to be a consequence. But if they're just learning and they're growing and they're being a normal kid, it might not be the right time for a consequence. All right, number 3. Do I desire most to look good right now? I started asking myself that question after I had a little situation at the grocery store one time where I was so embarrassed at the way that my kids were acting, and I realized, wait a minute, is this about me? Is this about a reflection of me? Or is this more about a reflection of Christ? And that is a very tricky trap that we get into as parents. So, do I desire most to look good right now? Is that really what the problem is? Or is it really that my child is doing something wrong? All right, number 4, last one. Another toe stepper. Have I given my child the grace I would expect given to me? Before I decide that my child has exhausted all of the chances, I ask myself, am I doing something that I know if I were the person doing this, I should be punished for, or I should have a consequence for? And if that's true, then there's a decent chance it's time for a consequence. But sometimes, again, we think, well, I would want some more grace here. I would want the opportunity to make it right. Okay, so now if you answer all of those questions and you still feel like a consequence is in order, it's time to get creative. One thing I really want to stress here is that if the consequence doesn't cost the child something, they're going to continue to do the thing. At some point, you have to come to the place where you believe that the consequence for doing that thing is bigger than what you want to pay for doing the thing. This is why a consequence is not a one-size-fits-all thing. That's why restriction, timeout, grounding isn't going to work for every single kid and isn't going to work all the time or for every single situation. It just can't. It can't be a one-size-fits-all thing. we have to do the hard work of figuring out what is going to cost our kids and what is going to help them to see the error and correct what's going on. Our goal here isn't to just make our kids militant children who will do whatever we say. Our goal is to help them to see their need for Christ and to help them to become more like Him. This is where logical consequences come in. So a logical consequence is exactly what it sounds like. It's a consequence that is logical. It makes sense. It fits the crime, if you will. For example, if you're tipping over your chair at dinner, then I am going to assume that it's unsafe for you to use your chair. So I'm going to ask you to stand for the remainder of dinner. The key to effective consequences is in the way you word it. So let me give you another example. If you're fighting with your siblings, I will assume you have nothing better to do and I'll give you a chore. Now, I could say, you know what? You guys are fighting. Here's an extra chore. So the difference is you're putting the consequence in their hands. You're showing your child what they have to do to make sure they don't have to do the extra chore. And that is golden. Since you can't remember to put your toys away, I'm going to keep them somewhere safe and you won't be able to use them. So those are the kinds of consequences that we want to be using because it really shows them, oh, if I want to play with my toys, then I need to remember to put them away because if I don't, then I won't be able to play with my toys. One time my boys were fighting and they were fighting with words, going back and forth, you this, you that, that kind of thing. Set a timer for 5 minutes and I said, all right, boys, here's your timer for 5 minutes. For the next 5 minutes, you're going to say kind things to your brother. And if you stop before the timer goes off, I will restart it. Go. And they had to take turns going back and forth. I could have told them, go to your rooms, be separate. You're not allowed to be near each other. But the thing that I'm teaching them there is you don't have to love your brother. Not only am I teaching them that kindness isn't really important, I'm not helping them understand the right thing to do. I'm not giving them the positive. I'm just giving them a bunch of negative. And I'm telling them, you know what? You just can't be together. So as much as you can, try to use the positive thing. So, of course, my boys did start saying positive things together. Now, I will warn you, they started with, I like your dog. And then the next kid said, fine, I like your mom. So sly, those boys. So funny. But they did eventually get to the good stuff because they had 5 minutes. So there was only so long that they could compliment each other on things that weren't really compliments, right? They eventually had to get down to it or they were going to get their timer reset. I suggest that you make a list of the things that happen regularly in your home and then write in your phone a logical consequence that you might use. And you might even have a list of a couple. By the way, you don't have to give your kids a consequence in that moment. You can take a few minutes and say, you know what? I need to really think on what we can do to fix this. Give it a few minutes. Give it sometimes an hour. It's okay to sit down and really think about what you want to do to help them to not do this anymore. Remember, that's the goal. Our goal is not to punish them. Our goal is not to make your kids, iron-fisted. You are going to do what I say. Our goal is to point them to Christ. Our goal is to get them to stop doing these things and to start becoming more Christ-like. And we can't do that if we don't help them with some positive things and show them what they can do to actually stop doing the thing that they're doing. Now, I mentioned that I have a huge list with lots of ideas. Yes, it's not one size fits all, but having some ideas is a good way to get your juices flowing. So I will link to that post for you. I want you to remember before you give a consequence to make sure that you've taught your kids about obedience. Remember to teach them how and why they should obey. Remember to have some simple rules, love up, love out, and then ask yourself those questions. Is this a sin against God? An inconvenience to me? Is this foolishness or childishness that I'm dealing with? Do I desire to look good right now? Is that what this is about? And lastly, have I given my child the grace I would expect to be given to me? I think about it like this. If my role is to share Christ with my kids, that's going to look a lot more like grace than hard-hearted law. And I like obedience a lot. I'm a rule follower. I'm a firstborn. I think people should do the right thing. But I want my kids to know Christ. I want them to know the incredible grace that He has extended to us. And if I'm not extending some grace to them, then I'm not giving them the picture of Him that they need to see. Thanks for joining me. I will see you next time. Bye.